Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you'll never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
Okay, day 18 just wrapped up. It was an interesting day. There were two cryptocurrency experts who took the stand. The first one up was ZeMing. Now, they asked him, like everyone else, to confirm his qualifications, to confirm the statements given to the court with his name on it were true and to the best of his knowledge, or true to the best of his knowledge and genuinely his. And then they went into a lengthy discussion about various technical aspects of Bitcoin. So they wanted to talk about the difference between public and private keys and what they're both used for, how you can't generate private keys from public keys, and how the early Bitcoin blocks differentiate themselves from other blocks because the public keys are available for them. They talked about how the signing and verification process worked and how that process could be subverted. And they tried to suggest that ZeMing isn't actually a qualified expert to speak on these things because he said something where there was some point in the documentation that he's not a cryptographer or has no cryptography background. But he emphasized that he's a Bitcoin and a blockchain expert and that he didn't need to be a cryptographer or cryptography expert in order to speak about these subjects. And then they didn't really press the matter of his qualifications beyond that when the discussion moved on. They went into the Gavin and Andreessen signing stories from both Craig and Gavin, and they pointed out little indiscrepancies between the story about how Craig said that Gavin had installed the Electrum software, but Gavin said that it was Craig, how Gavin asked him to sign the message, Gavin's favorite number is number 11. Or Gavin's favorite number is 11, but Craig had added the CSW initials at the end without Gavin specifying that. And then they went on to suggest that the signing session had been faked in various methods and essentially elaborated on how that process could have been subverted and made a bunch of suggestions that it had been subverted. They suggested that the additional measures that Craig had taken in the signing session, where he had downloaded the blockchain, the entirety of the blockchain, they said that it was an unnecessary step and that he was just doing these additional steps to sow confusion in order to confuse people. But it seemed like a weak argument that he's making additional information available to confuse people. Like you could verify everything on the full blockchain itself. It's there, it's in front of you, you have it there, you can do that. That's not there to sow confusion. But they tried to paint it that way. And then they took a little break. They came back from that break and they discussed Craig's mining operation. So there were some details about Craig's mining operation where they called into question the validity of his story. So he said that he had 69 computers set up on racks and that they were networked together and mining Bitcoin. And they suggested that the mining difficulty at the time was too low to justify having that many computers tied together in a network to just do mining operations at that time, because it wasn't that hard to actually mine Bitcoin at the very beginning. There wasn't very much hash rate and the difficulty was low. But ZeMing's defense for that was that if you were the person who had launched the network, you wouldn't strictly be mining. There'd be certain diagnostics that you'd be running and there'd be testing that you'd be doing on the network. So the entirety of the CPU power that he'd be providing from those 69 computers, not all of it would be going to mining. A lot of it would be going to other tasks. So it would be really hard without having an understanding of what those computers were doing to speculate what the hash rate would be. So he's really just laid it out that that's such an open-ended thing that you could never say that those 69 computers were excessive at the time because you don't know what they were actually doing. But yeah, then they tried to really discount his independence when they moved beyond the questions of Craig's mining operations, his early mining operations. They really tried to say that because Mr. ZeMing had written blog posts and a book outlining his suspicions that based on the available evidence that it seemed as though Craig is Satoshi. And they really tried to say that because he's made these statements that he isn't truly independent as an expert. And it's something that he did a very good job of defending himself for, because, I mean, truly he has made statements that an outside observer may see as being biased. But he insisted that as a man of science, he just objectively looks at the facts and draws a conclusion based on those facts, and that those conclusions aren't set. So he's not convinced that Craig is Satoshi. He's just saying from the available evidence, it appears as though Craig is Satoshi. Which is great. I mean, I love maybe logic. I'm a big fan of Robert Anton Wilson. If you've never heard of that guy, brilliant guy, check him out. Everyone in crypto should know who Robert Anton Wilson is and what maybe logic is, because I think it's something everyone in crypto should be aware of. He's a really smart guy, but that's also just the way scientists work. That's the analytical mind of the scientific method being applied. But yeah, he did a good job of defending himself, I thought. Everyone is biased in this case. He is just a little bit more honest about it. So really, I don't fault him for having opinions and having stated them. Even though he says it's not really his opinion, it's just his conclusion based on the available facts. It comes across as an opinion, so he did a pretty good job of defending his independence, in spite of these statements that seem to imply he's not independent. I mean, what are you going to do? But they had lunch. They had an extended lunch break, so it was like an hour and a half for lunch today. And after lunch, they had Sara Meiklejohn take the stand. She was the expert cryptocurrency witness provided by COPA. And she was kind of smiling the whole time. You could tell just based on the nature of her testimony and her report, all she really had to do for COPA was speculate in all the different ways in which these signing sessions could have been subverted. And it's a pretty easy job, really, because you're just coming up with speculation and hypothetical scenarios in which the signing session could have been converted. And that's why I think she kind of had a smile on her face, because she's just making stuff up. Like, here's her job, just make stuff up. She's not worried about getting sued after this, I don't think. I don't think she's worried about the outcome affecting her in a big way either way. So she seemed pretty relaxed on the stand. She seemed like the most honest out of all of COPA's witnesses so far. She wasn't glancing over and smiling at the lawyers the way the other ones were. She seemed quite confident, and I thought she did a pretty good job, actually, even though a lot of what she was giving was just speculation. And a lot of it was reasonable speculation, but some of it was unreasonable. And there were certain things that she'd said that, again, were warranted and valid, and there were things that just weren't. So example of that, she was saying that downloading the Bitcoin blockchain was unnecessary and it didn't allow any additional verification. And when pressed about that by Craig's lawyers, like, if you have the blockchain available so that you can check and verify that everything that we're showing you is actually there on the blockchain, how does that not allow for additional verification? And her response to that was, it only allows for additional verification if you allow people to stop and play with it and look and actually do that. But it didn't seem like in their documentation that was done. So that's kind of a valid point. But again, it's just all conjecture. Everything that came out of her time on the stand, it was just her speculating about the wildest things in some cases, like that the hotel Wi-Fi router was using like the default password still. No hotel is going to have the default password. Not any reputable hotel chain is going to have the default password installed on their routers and their public Wi-Fi. That's just not something that any reputable hotel chain would have. So just a little bit of a weird thing to even suggest. But again, she's just saying this all with a smile on her face because that's her job for the day, is just wildly speculate as to what may have happened. And really, she went through everything that could have possibly gone wrong with these signing sessions. That Gavin didn't check the seals on the newly purchased laptop to make sure that the factory seals on the laptop were in place, that he didn't make sure that there wasn't some boot process done when the laptop was initially installed to put some sort of weird operating system on it, or some corrupted operating system, that there wasn't some additional software installed when he wasn't looking, that he didn't check the HTTPS in the browser URL. All these things which are just... It was honestly a little bit insulting to Gavin Andreessen's intelligence. He's a smart man. He didn't go out and get Craig to buy a brand new laptop and then bring it back to the hotel and leave it with Craig for a couple hours. Like, this isn't something that... It's just insulting to suggest that Gavin wouldn't be looking for these basic things. And there are certain things that he didn't document. There are definitely verifications that he could have done that he didn't document, but that doesn't mean that they weren't done. It just might mean that he didn't recall doing them. It might mean that he just didn't document it. Like looking for that HTTPS. If I was talking about it, I wouldn't explicitly state that I made sure that that was there. I wouldn't go into that much great detail. You're just giving a story, right? But yeah, she just had a field day on the stand. I could tell. She had a big grin on her face. She was smiling the whole time. You can't get in trouble when it's your job to speculate and produce wild conjecture. So that's most of what we saw. It wasn't particularly interesting. I really thought that she did a good job on the stand because it was her job to wildly speculate. But there was nothing really definitive in her report or in her statements. It was all just, this is what may have possibly been done to subvert the process. And there was a few things that she suggested were more likely than others, like a spoof website could have been used and directed to a different place. But she also suggested that Craig may have altered DNS records when looking for the Electrum website so that you could temporarily redirect to a fake website. Lots of things that are within the realm of possibility, but quite out there in terms of how plausible they really are. So again, that's why I think she had just a shit-eating grin on her face the whole time, just because it was just pure conjecture from her. I mean, she was talking about homograph attacks where Craig may have used some alternative font or character that looks like normal font, but redirects to some different website, but then didn't state in her report finding any such websites. So obviously there's probably none like that exist. She was saying there's obviously different TLDs, so you go to electrum.org or .com. That's something that's visually verifiable. And it's like I said, Gavin Andreessen is not a stupid man. If he's going to go out of his way to get Craig to buy a brand new laptop to perform the signing session for him so that he can have peace of mind that the signing session is authentic, he's going to observe these things. And it just seemed a little outrageous to even suggest a lot of this, but it was her job. That's what COPA paid her to do, so I understand that's what she was there for, and I understand why she had a big grin on her face while she was doing it, because all she had to do was wildly speculate, and there's absolutely no chance of that coming back to harm her. So that's why I think she was the most comfortable and the most relaxed of all of the COPA witnesses so far, because these other guys, they may have some challenges on the other side of this trial, let's just say that, if Craig is deemed to be Satoshi. But all in all, mostly an uneventful day. It was a lot of speculation. I don't think any of the statements made by either of the witnesses really swayed the judge in a big way. Although I think when Zem Gao was asked about some of the comments he made, I was actually quite happy to hear There was one comment he made where he said that he speculated that based on his assessment of how things would go, that he believed COPA would try to trick the judge. And it was just good to have someone other than Craig say that in court for the first time. I really like ZeMing. His testimony was on point. He was definitely a little bit biased, but he was the most honest about it. Everyone in this case is biased. He's just the best at, or he's the worst at hiding it, rather. But yeah, that's my take for the day. Come back tomorrow. Like, share, subscribe.